Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to be looking at multiplying and dividing by 10, 100 and 1000. And there's a really easy little trick that you can learn for both multiplying and dividing by those numbers. But before we talk about the actual trick, I think one thing that's important to remember or think about is the zeros. So the reason that these tricks work is that 10, 100, and 1000 and larger numbers where there's all zeros at the end, they have zeros in them. So I've written up a little table, kind of a key here for us to remember. So when we multiply or divide by 1, we have to figure out how many zeros are there. 1, 10, 100, or 1000. So in 1, there's 0, okay? In the 10, there's 1. In 100, there's 2. And in 1000, there is 3. Okay? And we could keep going if we wanted to. So we're going to bear that in mind when we look at this trick. So I'm going to start with multiplying first. So here's a number. 231. Now, if we were multiplying by 1, and most of you probably know this, we actually just keep the number as it is, all right? And in a second you'll see, I don't need to add a 0 on in, you'll see how it changes as it goes along. I just need to keep the number as it is. Now, where things do change is when we start multiplying by 10. Now, 10 has 1 0 in, so what that means is that we have to add, when we multiply by 10, all we have to do is add the 0 on the end. So now we've got 2,310. 231 times 10 is 2,310. Now, if I continue along this pattern, say I'm multiplying by 100, there's 2 zeros, so we add 2 zeros in the end. 23,100. When I go to 1,000, 3 zeros, and you guessed it, 3 zeros on the end. This time, I've got 231,000. And the rule just keeps continuing. So when we multiply by numbers that have zeros on the end, to work out what the number will be, we just have to count the amount of zeros and put them on the end. Say if we took a number like this, which is 1,000,000, we count how many zeros there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you just put them on the end, okay? And that will get your answer. So it's a really simple way. So when you multiply by 10, 100, 1,000, etc., all we have to do is count the zeros and add them on the end. Now, the next thing we're going to do is think about the dividing. So the dividing is a little bit different. It's probably a little bit more tricky, but in a way it works the same way. So this time if I divide by 1, 231 divided by 1 is 231. I'm just going to spread these digits out a little bit. Now that's all fine and dandy because we know that 1 fits into 231 times. Where it gets a little bit more tricky is when we're dividing by 10. And so what we actually do here is we remember that every number, if it's a whole number, still has this decimal point here. Okay? We don't normally write it because the number's a whole number. But when we divide by 10, we remember that it's there. Now, in 10, there's 1 0. So what we have to do here is we have to shift this decimal point 1 space, okay? Which would make it 23.1, okay? And so that's the pattern that we're going to be using. So if I'm dividing by 100, instead of making one jump, I'm going to make 2. Okay? Which would mean the answer would be 2.31. Now you might be starting to see a pattern. If I am dividing by 1,000, then I have to make a third jump. And when I make those jumps, I'm jumping the number, moving the decimal point further forward. Now the answer, 231 divided by 1,000, would be 0.231. And often people like to put a 0 there to remind them. Okay, and this would continue working. Now, if I was to go to 10,000, this is where things are a little bit different. So this time, I'm making an extra jump, okay? And so what happens here is because I've made an extra jump, I actually put a 0 in, okay? So that would make it 0.0231. Put the 0 there so I can remember. So 231 divided by 10,000 is 0.0231. Okay, and that's the rule. So to go over it, when I'm multiplying, I add the zeros to the end. Add the zeros to the end. When I'm dividing, I shift the decimal point forward. Okay? So, and with that divided one, depending on how many zeros there are. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember as well. All right, so that's how we multiply and divide by numbers like 10, 100, 1,000, or other numbers that have zeros at the end. Thanks, guys.